All right, so I am going to be kind of walking through the simplicity and power of the new Clojure CLI. There's some changes that have been made and some new things, and it took me kind of a little bit to get into it and start using it. So I thought I would kind of share what I found, how it impacted me. It's not going to be an exhaustive overview of all of the individual little features. There's a lot of like under the hood stuff that didn't really affect like the actual Clojure, the actual interface. So I'm not going to really talk about that much. They're more important for like being a tool writer, but it's more about interacting and actually launching JVMs for me. So if I can do, by the way, this whole presentation is done in Pitch. They are Clojure based, so not only is this about Clojure, this presentation is running on Clojure, so extra cool. So just a little bit about me. I've kind of alternated my career between dynamic and dynamic and static languages, PHP, Java, Perl, Go, Python, and I stuck with dynamic, and I don't know that I'll ever leave again. I'm the kind of person that would kind of learn a new language every couple of years just to kind of try new things out, and Clojure is the first time that I really don't want to learn anything else. So I've been a long time hobbyist, last 3 years professionally using Clojure, and my day job, I work with real-time data in esports leagues, and Clojure is really a great fit for that. And then for anyone that doesn't know, a friend and I do a weekly, mostly weekly, sometimes every other or every third weekly podcast called the Functional Design Clojure. So please check it out if you want to hear more. They're usually like 20 minutes long, so it's not too much of an investment, but we have fun doing them. So first off, I want to start off with a little history of the command line interface. It was released on December 8th, 2017, so we're coming up on almost 3 years of having it in our lives. And there was kind of a big flurry of activity. Lots of new features were released in that first couple of months, but then on February of the next year, it kind of stabilized, and it was mostly bug fixes after that. And then all of a sudden, July of this year, there was a pre-release. Alex Miller kind of popped into the announcements channel on Clojure and Slack and said, "Hey, I've got a pre-release if you want to look at it." And it was basically the biggest changes that have happened since the start, or since it was launched. And then just over a couple months later, the stable release. So, and there have been releases since then, kind of refining things, but basically anything past the 25th of September is going to be good for what I'm talking about. So, and then the big thing that I wanted to make sure, like I was thinking people might have this question is, should I worry? Is this going to be like, is this going to break everything? You know, no, you shouldn't worry. And can I install the latest one? Yes, go ahead, install the latest. You'll have to kind of suffer through some deprecation warnings, but in general, it's worth pushing through that because there's a lot of cool things. So, so first off, what changed? The biggest source of deprecation warnings is going to be all of those single segment dependencies. So I know that they're kind of quite a few of them in the Clojure, and like in my dep CDNs, I got a bunch of them. So you have to start qualifying them, otherwise the Clojure command line is going to complain at you. And it can be a little bit tedious, but it's, you know, I think a little editor macro or two can get you there. And there's this, speaking of Michael Borkent, he actually has some experimental code to be able to rewrite EDN without actually changing the white space, like preserves comments and everything. So it's a pretty cool little thing to check out. And the next thing is the actual command line flags have changed. So there's some that have been deprecated. Thankfully, none of them have been removed. There was a lot of, like in the first versions of it, a lot of the deprecated stuff, they were just removed. And there was a lot of feedback. And thank you to Jean for a lot of that feedback. thanks to that, they were just deprecated. So it's okay that you should be able to upgrade, because then you just get deprecation warnings instead of just things breaking out from you. So the options that are out are the ones where you're basically combining different, different types of aliases together. So JVM options, dependency options, and class path options, those are kind of going away. And they're kind of reshaping, so those are not being, those are not being used, or not allowed anymore. But then there's always been A and M. A is kind of the one that most people use, and is kind of refined to not be the one that you should use. You can, if you want to just start a Clojure REPL, like the actual Clojure REPL. If you just run Clojure by itself, the REPL you get there, that's what that's for. If you want to run a main function in one of your namespaces, it's M for main. And then there's a couple of new options which are really cool. So the coolest one is the -x for running a function. So you can basically run a function out of any namespace that you want. It has to conform a little bit to a pattern, but it's a lot more flexible. So I'll get into that a little later. And then prepare. So basically, if you want to do any of the above ones and you just want to get all the dependencies loaded and everything, you can use -p. So that's good for when you're building Docker containers and that kind of stuff. And so it kind of piggybacks on one of the other ones. And the way that I think the best way to kind of think about this is, the old style is the question you're asking yourself when you're building your command line is, what am I mixing together? I'm using a couple of O's, a couple of R's, I'm doing all those things together. And now the question to ask is what I want to accomplish. So what is the task that I want to do right now? Do I want to start a REPL, run a main, or execute a function? And all of the aliases basically will combine together without, there's not really any special kinds of aliases. There's just different ways of mixing them together to support what you want to accomplish. And I'll stop there. Is it any questions so far?
Are you going to show up how you could do something that you would do one way previously, how you're going to do it now?
Yeah, so I basically, most of my demo is going to be around running a function stuff. I think most of the time people have been using -a to launch programs, or I went through a bunch of the projects that work with the command line tools, and almost all of them have hey, put this alias in there and then run Clojure-A and that alias name, and then pass args to it. And so that now is running a main. That's not, you don't want the REPL, you want to run a main in some namespace. And so basically the easy thing to do is you just, every time you're going to use A, just switch it and use -M. Because it'll work for you. This is kind of like a way of showing how things would go from the old to the new. So if I was wanting to run a REPL, which is actually a main, it's not running the Clojure REPL, it's running its own, the REPL namespace. And then I wanted to combine a local lib class path, so that's the -C, and then -R, I have this scratch code that has its own dependencies, and I want to load that in too. So previously I would do that because I know that those are the kind of greetings what I need to put together, and then I want to run the REPL. And so the easiest thing to do is just take all of your aliases and smush them together and put at the beginning of it what you want to do. So in this case, I want to run that main. And so as a result, you can see it just kind of ends up shrinking your command line down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hello, can I? Excuse me.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, yeah, so first time here. Hello, nice to meet you, everybody. I'm Jesus, my name, in Canada. So I want to hear again the prepare option. Is that you run it and it will just download the dependencies and all stuff, or don't do anything else, something like that?
Can you say that again one more time?
So I just want to understand better the P option, the prepare option.
Okay.
You mentioned it, but I kind of lose it. And I think I understood is like it will download the dependencies but don't
Yeah.
actually run the
Yeah, precisely. So the options are A, M, and X are basically to do something. And if you take that same command line and just put -P before the other option, it'll basically get all the way to the point where it's going to run that task and then stop. So it'll download all the dependencies, it'll compute the class path, it'll clone Git repos if you need them. It basically will do all the work up until that point and then stop.
I find that fantastic because it would be friendlier, or it would be good for people coming from other not Java ecosystems,
Mm-hmm.
where we are used to like install all dependencies in one step and prepare everything in one step. And another thing is to actually run the commands. And it always bites, at least for me, that in Java you try to do like everything in one step because, cache or whatever. What I find is like it would be helpful, I think, to welcome another community of programmers used to another way to work, and people that has already pipelines that do things in steps, like do this step first, this one, and that I think we can reuse a lot of scripting for another language, for example, or try to reuse another pipelines, and this would be that step with this -P. Great, I like it.
Yeah, I used to, in the previous version of the command line, you could do -S path, which would just print out the class path. And I used that instead of -P because P didn't exist. Basically, do everything you're going to do and then print out the class path. That's what I intended to use. But I had to know that -P is a much clearer, like it's all about preparation. It's a good mnemonic.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me see. So when you put all of the aliases together, the maps that are inside the alias or the arrays or the vectors inside, they just end up concatenating, either merging or concatenating together. So it's the order that you put the alias in is the order that they get concatenated. So the one on the right wins. There's a couple of them that override, that are more for like, I want to run something but not use my class path, but those are kind of the exception. For the most part, you want to combine things together. The other thing that caught me off guard, and I had to really had to play with it for a while, is, like I said before, I would often just, like I would run something and I wouldn't have the right thing in the class path. And so I would just, up arrow and add -S path at the end. And then it would print the class path. And I could actually look at that and try to understand why, what wasn't there, or what was there and was in the wrong place or whatever. You can't do that anymore because the -M flag takes all of the args that are after it and assumes that you're trying to pass them to the main as arguments, as command line arguments. Same with -X. So basically either the -M or the -X will like stop Clojure's command line processing and pass everything else. So you have to put that S path or other things in front of, if you don't, because otherwise it will confuse it. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
in some other situations, some other systems use like a dash dash or to
Right.
separate the things. Is that available in Clojure CLI?
No, it just, everything that comes after that. And actually, if you have a dash capital M something and then dash capital M something like a different one, that
Mhm.
won't work either. It'll treat the second one as the first command line argument that it passes to the main. And so basically, it's another thing that kind of encourages you to push all your aliases together, because once it hits an X or an M, everything after it is ignored. Essentially, I mean, not ignored, but it's not used for Clojure arguments. It's used for your function or your main function.
Thanks.
And so I just listed out these are shown in the command line, but it's just to kind of lay it out again. You know, you use the -S or -J for like JVM args, the -P if you want it, and then AX or M, and then args. So everything's got to be whatever bucket those are in. If you want something new in one of those buckets, you have to put it in that order. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good day. Okay, so then what's new? Let's see. So the first thing that I was a pleasant surprise was, so the Clojure command line does a lot of work in resolving class, like it merges all your deps.edn files, you know, the one in your project, the command line, you know, your user one, the one that was installed with it, calculates all the dependencies and the class path. It does a lot of work. And then it runs your you know, your main or whatever. And part of I mean, there's a bunch of information that is just there and would be useful. And so it's actually now available as a system property. So if you load up that, it's a Clojure.basis. If you just get that property, it's a file path, and you load it up, you can, it's just a huge wealth of information that you can use to, you can use it in your REPL. You can do all kinds of things. I mean, it's useful for tool writers, but it's also, I think, useful for just being able to inspect things, because it's a nested data structure, and so there's a lot of questions you can answer of that. You know, like anything in our Clojure lives, you know, if something is available as data, it's wonderful, because then, you know, we have all the tools we need to understand it. So I'll show an example of this later in the demo. And then let's see. Oh, all right. So now the big one. So -X for executing functions directly. I think this is definitely, I don't know if this might have been the motivation for doing all of the changes. It was one of the things that really intrigued me right off the bat. And it was really interesting to read Alex Miller's blog posts about the new releases and kind of dig into a little bit of why this even appeared. And it really is interesting, because like Clojure or Java, you know, any JVM application, basically the entry point for years has always been a main function. You know, in Java, it's, you know, public static void main, and in Clojure, it's our little dash mains. But the problem with that is everyone has to then handle option parsing. Everyone has to figure out a way to do that. And there are good tools for that in Clojure and in the JVM also. But Alex and team were like, how can we, you know, if we were doing this from scratch, if we were trying to approach running something in Clojure from the command line, what approach would we take? And the way that they came up with, maybe the first way, but, you know, maybe this will be the only way we get, but is basically being able to run any function by specifying it on the command line. And all of the arguments that function are basically keyword and value pairs. So when it gets translated into Clojure land, it comes in as a map. So the function has to take a single argument, and that argument has to be a map. But but other than that, there's not really any restriction on what that function can do. But because you're invoking it from the command line, you're able to add whatever arguments you want after naming that function. It actually ends up being a really easy way to execute code, but also it makes it basically so everyone is at the same level. Nobody has to implement this sort of parsing. The Clojure tools do it for you, and so you're able to kind of get all that functionality for free. And it's actually a really nifty way of going about it. So it feels very Clojure-y, like it feels like a very special thing that we get as a community that you wouldn't be able to really do in another language. So the -x just, it takes the aliases like anything else. And then it basically looks at the remaining arguments and it goes, are there an odd number of arguments? If there's an odd number of arguments, assume the first one is you're telling me which function you want to run. And then it's key value pairs after that. And if it's an even number of arguments, it just assumes those are key values that you want to put into the map to pass that function. It ends up looking pretty good. So, and then I have a demo. Any questions so far though?
Wait a second. So you said if it's an even number, like, how does it identify the function?
You'd have to specify the function in your alias.
Oh, okay.
In your alias map. Yeah, I think if you don't specify it anywhere, well, I don't know. We should see what it would look like. Any other questions?
I suppose the shell escaping problem will be explained in the demo, no?
Yes, we will talk about that, definitely. Oh yeah, sorry, I did mention it. But basically everything is parsed as Eden. So it's like Eden read string. That's what is every argument is passed to Eden read string. And so you have to be able to sneak it past the shell so that it gets to the Eden reader. And sometimes that could be a little tricky, but we'll get there. All right, so I changed my share. Can everyone see my terminal now?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so I have a little a playground here because playing is the best way to learn. And so I have the Clojure tools here, and you can see if I go like, I have version 7.27, which I think is the latest one, unless a newer one came out in the last couple of days. But the cool thing is you can just do Clojure -x. And so if you give it an odd number of arguments, it'll assume that the first one is the function you want to run. So there aren't a whole lot of functions that take a map, but one that I know of is clojure.core prn. So I can say foo, true, bar, false, like that. And so if I run that, it basically runs the prn function, which is just, printed out. And then there's key value pair past that, right? And so you can go like this, and you can take it so that instead of being just a key, it's a path. And so it will do like an associ in. And so you can see that false is now bar baz, kind of nested in there. And this kind of speaks a little bit to the shell escaping issue that we were talking about. Is you have to use what I believe is called a core field comma to basically, because Clojure thinks the comma is white space, and but the shell doesn't. So it's the other way to do this would be to go like and put single quotes around it, which might be clearer. But and then the last one is if you want to have a string, the string has to parse as Eden. So a string in Eden actually has the quotes around it, like when it's serialized. So you have to do single quote, double quote, string value in order to sneak that. Oh, looks like I overwrote myself. In order to get that to parse its way in. So string values and anything with a space in it is a little awkward, but it's not too bad. Any questions about the escaping stuff or just the ability to call a function like this?
Hey, Nate, I've got a question, and maybe this is a bad idea, but is there like an apply form of this? Like if I've got a data structure, or would it just be up to me to undo that and give it in the key value pair format?
There isn't a way to do an apply like if it already had the curly braces around it, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think this way of invoking functions, when you can pass it in like that, I think that there might be new ways of invoking functions. Like I think this is one of the ones that kind of makes sense to start, but one where you have bigger Eden forms might be something that would come in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, no problem. It's all good. I could script my way around that anyway. Just curious if there's something out of the box.
No, I think that's. But good question though, because there have been times where I've wanted to do that and I have to just lay it out. I mean, it really is about calling the function, and interactively making the args. If you want to have, well, and we'll get to it, where you want to just provide a bunch of args already by default, then it's something that you can put in there.
Looks like we got a chat from Sean.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, cool. So but according to Sean, you would be able to. Here, I'll just copy this.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I'll run it in my.
Yeah. So it's a map with one key of data, and then what you get is. Yeah. Sorry, I should have left that as Clojure corporate.
No problem. So basically that gets you one. Oh.
/Clojure, sorry, because you don't have Clojure globally.
Oh yes. Well, I have the old version of Clojure installed globally.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Thankfully, single quotes are pretty rare. Like I can't think of the last time I used a single quote, so it's not like JSON data where you're backslash escaping every other character. But that's a good tip there. So anyway, let's make it a little easier to call that. If we go into our dep CDN, we can make an alias for core, and the way you would specify. So the first thing to show is there's a thing called NS default, which is basically what namespace do I want to use instead of having to fully qualify. So we just do Clojure core. And if we go like this, we can just take off, we just close core. And now the function PRN is resolved in that namespace. So they're basically equivalent now. And I can't think, can anyone else think of another function in core that takes a map and does something useful with it? I was unable to. But the other thing is NS aliases allow you to have a few like short aliases for namespaces that are longer that you don't want to type. So we say core, let's say VP for Clojure.cp print that. And now we can go Clojure core. So CPRN for running it out of core. And then let's see, p print. This is probably gonna be the exact same because it's not a very nested data structure. So it's not gonna be that much different from PRN right now. but but hopefully that shows you how you can specify where the function comes from without having to specify the entire namespace there. So then I would like to show how to call a function that I wrote, so in this project, I have a main. So I can do a Clojure -m like that. I think that'll work. Oh, got caught by the system one there. So I want to run a main. And which main do I want to run? I want to run my main. But what I wanted to highlight in this one is I have a function here called deploy, which doesn't do any actual deployments, I promise. But it does kind of help show and will help kind of walk through what the alias will do. So if we have an alias up here, so I can call that directly just by saying -x main deploy. But it's not very helpful. So if I say, let's say deploy, and I want to exec the function main deploy. Now if I do that, oops, so real quick, am I going too fast for anyone? Is this an okay pace? I don't want to. Please stop me if and walk me back if you want me to explain something. I don't want to leave anyone behind. So let's go on here. So in here, the map, if it has a host key, it'll be what it deploys to. So if I do host, prod.supercool.com, it'll say deploying. And so it's pretty easy to override those arguments on the command line. And then if you want those to be in the actual deployment here, you just do exec args. Now I can just go like this. And it's got everything bundled into it. But I'm not calling a main. I don't have to parse any args. I'm basically able to call that. And so I can also keep going here and do like host, other. And what it does is it takes whatever's on the command line, merges it into that map, and then passes that map in. So you have all the flexibility of the command line, but all the composability of the alias.
Wonderful. The exec args that you have in the depcdn, that also has to be a map?
That's correct.
And that's because of the merging, I guess.
What's that?
I guess that's because of the merging.
Right.
Right, okay.
So then as an example of kind of how you would want to merge these in the future. So say this is deploy prod, right? So, and then we want to add another one for QA, right? So now we can do deploy QA and deploy prod. But there's a certain amount of duplication here. And so you can actually take it so that, let's just take these and just make them the exec args. And then we just have one, let's see. So now we have deploy to and prod or QA. So I'm actually using two aliases together. One has the function name and one has the arguments. And so, and again, you can also just do, in the function here, there's a verbose. I forgot to mention that before. So I can do verbose true. I still have all of the facility of overriding those arguments, but I can compose the aliases together. It's actually a pretty cool, I think, facility. Any questions real quick?
I have two. Hello.
Yeah,
So
hi.
yeah, probably this is the same question. I think Tizen. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce made, but I will do it again using case. Oh, this is great! Oh my god, I'm learning so much. But is it possible to define these args in an external file? I think it's related with what he was asking. But anyway, the question would be that one.
I don't think there is a way of defining them externally.
Like an EDN file, for example, can I, not necessarily the depths, but in an external EDN that I could choose or something.
I don't know. I don't believe so. So one way that you would be able to do that is if you combine, because there's 4 different levels of depths EDN files. There's the one that's installed with Clojure itself. There's the one in your home directory.
Yeah.
There's the file in your local directory, and then there's on the command line.
Yeah.
And so if you are in a project and you mix one of your user aliases in, that would be a way of it being from another file. But there isn't a way to like read another file in the midst of like, basically all the data has to be there. I mean, you could always pre-process something where you like run a make process that like merges a bunch of files together to make the depth EDN.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, totally.
that would be as close as you could get. Yeah.
The other question is, there is one thing I didn't understand. Was the first example you made with the square brackets, and that became a map inside the map in the console example, one of the first. So why did I didn't get that one? I understanding the rest, everything right, but that small example, I didn't get it. There must be something silly, stupid I am not getting.
Yeah. So this one right here where there's the square brackets.
Yes, that one. Yeah. So what is? Yeah.
So what is happening is Clojure is taking an empty map and then associating foo true. So the key foo will be true, right? And then it looks at the next thing and it finds that instead of just a single keyword, it's an array. And so instead of using assoc, it uses assoc in. And assoc in will like basically make nested map layers for every key level. And then it associates it in. So you can see that, so bar here is right here. It's the top level key. And then it makes a sub map with the second level one.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. Yes, in my intuition, I was expecting the vector to be the key and
to
false
be the key
value.
itself.
Yeah. But
well,
yeah,
that would be an example of something that you could not specify via the command line. You can make it like the false. You can make the value a vector, but you can't make a key a vector. It will interpret every key as you wanting to associate in.
Yeah. No, I didn't want to use to. Yeah, I was not saying to force it to happen. I was explaining what what was my intuition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Is that a limitation then? All the keys must be keywords?
I don't know. You know what? I've never. So I guess we can make this. Nope. It works. That's another interesting avenue to explore.
Can you make this is just like playing, but like, could you actually make the key a vector by putting a vector inside of a vector? I mean, like you could do your bar baz thing, but then just have like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that's cool.
So you could have, yeah, the bar baz,
And then just,
but just put vectors around it. Ah, life will find a way. That is,
there you go.
all right, there you go. Cool, there you go. Okay. Let's see. The next thing I wanted to show is an actual, like, this is kind of hypothetical stuff, but now this is an actual thing that I use the exec stuff for. And that is, for me, it's for launching my REPL. And so I'm just going to copy this because it would take me a long time to remember how to do this off of my memory. So I have a project called CLJ Dev, and it's basically just around launching REPLs and then loading up REPL readline. And it's something I use in a lot of my projects. So I don't have to have the REPL alias. This REPL alias is in my Clojure, like my my user level deps. But for this purposes of this demonstration, I put it in the dep CDN here so you can see it. But I specify it both with a main ops. So main ops is the way how you run a main, and then execfn is how if you want to, you know, so to speak, parameterize it and that kind of stuff. So once that's in there, I can run Clojure-m REPL. If I can type REPL. And it will start an nREPL server, start a pREPL server, and then drop me into, oops, not running as a function, into REPL readline, which is a really nice REPL experience. There's line editing and that kind of stuff. So I use that. I like it better than the raw Clojure REPL because it's nicer to use, and it supports Vim key bindings, and I'm a Vim user, so.
Could you show CDN
Yes.
again?
What's that?
Could you show your dep CDN again?
Sure. I can put this into, where's my, there it is.
What is, so the main ops, oh, that's specifying the lowercase m is specifying the name.
Which name, yeah, which namespace to run the main in. So I have a main in my clj-dev.repl namespace, and it'll run that. So it's running a main in this case.
Oh, okay. But you still need to do the dash capital M as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's why I have the dash capital M. Yeah, so the M says use that alias, and then it'll run that main, the main out of that namespace that's specified there.
Oh, okay.
So then if I switch it to an X, it'll run, I get the same result, but it's because it's running a function and pulling a bunch of defaults off of that. So the cool thing is with X, if I exit and I go like pREPL false, then it won't start the pREPL server. Because I don't use pREPL. I used to use pREPL, but now I use nREPL. That's what Clojure prefers these days. It used to use pREPL. That's why this has pREPL and nREPL, because I've used Clojure for a long time in Vim. And one of the other features of this is that lots of times when I start a project or I start developing, I want to basically do a Clojure tools namespace refresh. I think that's the right namespace. Basically load all the code that you can find into memory. And so I can just run fresh through. And in this case, there's only one namespace. It's the main namespace, but you can see that it's loading it in memory here. So then I can run my main deploy, and you know, I don't have to require it or anything like that. It's already loaded. But just having those options on the command line is nice for customizability, but you know, let's face it, I'm the one using this project, so let's just make some exec args prepl false refresh true. And now if I go like this, it'll do the exact same thing, but I've moved the arguments into my into the dep CDN. And I can actually, what I probably would do if it was a real project that I was using with what I was working on with other people, is I would have the Nate alias in my user deps so that I can mix it in without, you know, making everyone look at a Nate alias all the time. That wouldn't be nice.
Yeah, Nate, the refresh true that's hot.
Yeah, it's quite useful. It can take a little bit of time on a bigger project, but it's nice to have all your code loaded into memory at the beginning of working instead of having to load piece by piece.
Yeah, typically got into the REPL and then call that command manually. So being able to do it on the command line is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well,
Nate, do you want to actually show what your CLJ dev REPL namespace has in it, just so folks know how those commands map to actual code? Because just :refresh true is not what causes this. It's what your function is doing on the
Yes.
inside. Yeah.
I can do that. Oops. Let me clone. Well, I already have it there. Well, I'm going to clone it as a new because I don't know what's there already. CLJ dev REPL. So here at the bottom are my two functions. So main is what runs, you know, when I just do -M, but start is what is the function that I want to call. So I have my defaults here and I load those in. And then you can see right here, it's just a bunch of whens, you know, when refresh, call namespace refresh. When it's nREPL, then I'm starting it up. You can also specify what namespace you want to start in. So I could say like, I want to, instead of starting in the CLJ dev namespace, which has like a bunch of things loaded, which I generally tend to stay in that one. Sometimes I want to load up, you know, main. I want to load up my main namespace so I can just call functions out of that without specifying them. And so does that make sense about how the function actually accomplishes this?
That's nice.
Cool. I'll have a link to this I have a link to this later in the presentation, and I'll post the slides. So, I think that's all. Oh, I wanted to show basis. So in my main here, I have print basis, which all it does is load it up and pretty print it, right? And the cool thing is I can do like this -x whatever. I can just do main print basis, and it'll be like do everything else except for instead of calling the function start, it's going to call print main basis. Sorry, main print basis. And there will be a little bit of data that comes out of this. So I'm going to pipe it to bat. Because bat is awesome. So here you go. You got your class path in there. And then as I page down, I'm not going to explain everything in here because I probably don't understand most of it. But you can see everything like here is there's where the code actually got checked out. You know, it actually makes a clone for you in your home directory. It checks out the SHA. It's resolved all the libraries down to, you know, what paths they are on the file system, and then also what their dependencies are, so it's this huge nested tree of information. I mean, not represented that way, but you could infer that. So yeah, there you go. 360 good lines of goodness. It's pretty amazing. So I can also just say, if I just do without any aliases, oh, that's right. It's a function, not a main. So this is basically the bare bones. This is what you're gonna get with Clojure. So you're gonna get Clojure and spec. That's it. So that one's a much shorter list, but it's kind of a fun little thing to be able to run and see what all the hard work that the Clojure command line is doing for you. And it makes all that bash worthwhile, hopefully.
Just quick question. I mean, like, what is the rationale for having the capital M and the lowercase m when you're running a main versus like not having to do that if you're running like a function?
I've seen a little bit of confusion about that.
Yeah, the main, when you do -m, you're saying I want to run main ops. Clojure.main itself, -m is an argument to Clojure.main and tells it which is the main namespace to run. So what you've got is this combination of the lowercase -m and the lowercase -e and the lowercase -i arguments to Clojure's main function.
Okay.
So that's what you're getting. So you're saying, I want to run a main, I want to run Clojure's main, and then here are the main options that get passed to Clojure itself.
Okay.
So, yeah, it looks a little weird if you just say Clojure -m, capital -m lower, and then something. But what you're actually doing is you're saying run Clojure main and then pass it -m and the namespace.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks for the explanation.
That's a really good way of putting it. -M is not I want to run a main, it's I want to run Clojure main. Well, there's only one Clojure main, and that's the one I want to run.
Right.
It's an interesting, that's a way of putting it. All right. Any other questions about the demo? I'm about to stop terminal. Any other questions?
One thing, I don't know, are you going to go into the basis anymore?
I wasn't planning on it.
Okay.
Do you have any? Yeah.
There, because you can get at the basis now in your program, any program started with the CLI, as you can see there on, as you could have seen there
I'll
on
get
screen.
it back there.
Yep. Here we go.
There you go.
You can see the aliases down there on line 40. And so this is all of the aliases in the system deps, your user deps, the project deps, and anything from the command line. And one of the things you can do, because you have access to the basis, is you can actually walk that data structure and go in and get aliases. So you can have things in your deps files under aliases that are just data. And then your program can actually interrogate that by looking at the basis data structure and saying, in the aliases, give me some particular key, and it can have any arbitrary piece of EDN data in it.
Yeah, as
if
big
you're
and gnarly as you
you've
want.
got
Yeah.
some sort of tool that does, I don't know, some fancy build related thing, you could have all your build description under an alias.
That's really interesting. And that alias doesn't need to be included in the command line args?
Nope, because you get the whole basis, so you can go and get any of those alias values yourself programmatically. I mean, you can get anything else in there, but that's one of the things that you could do with the aliases. You can have an alias for build options.
Could you then associate arbitrary Eden values with just like a random key inside of your dep CDN?
Inside the alias is part of it, yes. So it is an alias. You wouldn't be able to specify it on the command line because it wouldn't do anything useful, but you can read it inside your program.
Okay, my question was like, does it have to be within aliases, or are there other places in the dep CDN where you can locate like random pieces of data?
You could put it anywhere. It depends on how much validation's going on. But certainly under aliases, you can have aliases that are just regular old pieces of data. They don't have to be the sort of the keys or anything, because you can now specify alias names as values in the paths thing. Yeah, so it will appear in there, but you've got to be a little careful you don't collide with anything else, whereas the alias does allow you to put arbitrary data in. That's actually a defined thing you can do with it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, the aliases are kind of like, this is where you can mess with stuff and put arbitrary keys in there. So yeah, I would put it under aliases. But to the example of, this is running the REPL, like REPL-Nate, but in here is the deploy to alias. So every alias is in there, so you can go and grab other things. And here's another fun one. There's actually one called deps, and this comes with Clojure itself, and there's NS default. So as we talked about before, if you do the deps, then any function in here in this namespace that takes a map is callable. So I think you can actually, because right now you can do Clojure.stree like this. But then if you want to do X deps, how would you do the tree? I guess you just go like that.
You just got to specify it.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's it's the first time you've used the deps. You have to specify tree as the function
tree.
name.
Right.
And the other ones are Maven Palm, Maven install.
Right.
I can't remember what else. Those are the three I always remember.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to go back to my presentation.
Wait,
Yeah.
what did you just do? Like deps is an alias?
Deps is an alias that's supplied by the installed CLI.
Yeah, if I go here, lib, I think it's in lib. Yeah, so this is the deps that comes with Clojure itself. And there's a deps alias in there.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing that they're going to expose a lot more things with the -x. There has actually been more talk about the tools.build lately, which I'm guessing is going to be building off of -X, or the facility will be used for exposing those functions. But it's really cool, like you're exposing functions instead of exposing, main functions, which it just feels more, again, feels more Clojure-y.
Yeah, it's really nice not to have to do your own command line parsing.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay. Let me go back to. All right. I think my last bit of information. Oh yeah, data aliases. We talked with Sean just talked about this. So aliases are usually things you use with -xma, right? But you can just specify an alias, like in this case, a path. So paths. This is like a dep-cdn file, and I want my paths to be these ones. And so instead of the aliases being used for execution, they're used for data. And I found somewhere, I forget where it was, but you can use them when you specify exec args and in paths. And I actually asked yesterday or today in the channel, the tools deps channel, are there any other places? And Alex said, no, those are the only two for now. But there might be more in the future. But of course, with the basis, you can do all kinds of stuff, like Sean says. So, and here's a few of the tools that have been updated to use -X. So Sean's CLJ New and DepStar are very popular. Basically, anything that either Sean's maintaining or Alex is maintaining, it has been updated. And then I forget what the guy's name is, going through the deps deploy and adding X dash capital X. I forget what his name is.
Eric. Oh, I'm blanking on his last name, but it's Eric something.
Yeah, he's been chatting a lot in the tools deps channel, and I've seen some of the early stuff, and it's really cool because again, it's like I want, deploying, there's hundreds of different parameters, but I want all these parameters. I want to just tweak one. Well, now I have to figure out how to make that a command line argument. Nope, not anymore. It's just a key value pair.
Yeah, I don't think Test Runner is using -X yet.
Oh, the Cognitect one.
Yeah.
I think I went that one. I think it used to say you can use dash capital A, and it now says use dash capital M.
Use capital
Like it
M,
actually was like, because almost all the other ones I looked at, they all say, here's an alias with a main in it and use capital A. So they haven't been updated yet. At least the docs haven't. So, and then there's a couple of really good examples of aliases. There's John Stevenson's. Most people know him as Practicality. And then of course, Sean, he has a whole wonderful trove of aliases to look through. So I'd recommend going and looking at them at their aliases for inspiration, or just use them. They're good stuff. And I think that's it. Yep. So big thanks to Alex and team. Thank you to Sean and everyone in the Tools Depths channel who gave feedback. It was rougher at the beginning back in July. It's funny because like a couple weeks after it came out, like sometime in August, Alex was like, yeah, I expect stable is going to be a couple days. But it wasn't till till toward the end of September. And I think a lot of that was because there was a lot of refinement that went on in that channel. So I just appreciate all the hard work of Hogshead team and that channel. And then thank you everyone for listening to me. And I hope it was helpful. Any last questions?
That was really cool.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.